Hi there. It's been a while since I posted anything. So here is something that I've been thinking about this is something that I'm always thinking about. First chapters, how to start your book, how to start your story, because, as writers, we're told, and obviously we know that your first sentence, first paragraph, first page, first chapter, they must grab the reader's attention. And I've been looking through a lot of first chapters that I have, and I have a lot of them, and some of them are for projects that I'm not even working on. But if I get an idea and if it is persistent, then I form it into a chapter and put it aside in case I ever come back to this idea, and I will already have the first chapter. I will have something to work on. So I thought that maybe I will illustrate several first chapters to show where I started and how far I've come. Because I think that my attitude to writing has changed, and I think that I have gained a lot of experience having written, around 8, maybe 9 books. And here is an example of the first chapter for the very first book that I ever wrote. It was many, many years ago, and I, looking at the first paragraph here, I feel like I wanted it to be very, very dramatic, and apparently that's what I thought dramatic was. So here is an example of the first chapter that I ever wrote for the first book that I ever completed. And later I will post videos with other chapters, just to show how my attitude to first chapters have changed. Hopefully it has changed, because maybe it hasn't. I don't know. We shall see. So, chapter 1, A Banished Book and a Silenced Nanny. I thought that it was a nice title, but looking back, I would just leave a banished book and I would delete the second part. Dark green curtains with many holes were drawn back, showing wide, ominous windows in green iron frames, and a huge dark room lit by feeble rays of an unenthusiastic sun coming from the high gray sky. Well, this was quite a mouthful. Yes, this unenthusiastic. I'm not sure why I chose to call my son unenthusiastic, but that's what I called it, and unfortunately, it's very difficult to pronounce. So obviously I was going for dramatic effect here, but I'm not sure that it worked because the sentence is way, way, way too long. Too many adjectives, too many objects to focus on. And I think that the drama loses halfway through this very long sentence. But let me read the first paragraph. I'm not even sure why I'm doing it. So obviously just to illustrate that hopefully I have learned something. Now that the room was illuminated, 2 figures could be seen inside. One was sitting in an old black deep armchair, rocking back and forth, an ancient rusty book held tight in her hands. Another was standing by the window. Her arms were folded on her heaving chest, and her naturally full lips were pursed into a thin crossed line. One was old, another was young. One was in a good mood, another was out of humor. One was unwise enough to break the gloomy silence of the house by chanting an old, long-forgotten line. So this is the first paragraph, and back then I thought that it was very, very dramatic, and I was probably thinking that it would attract and grab readers' attention. I'm not sure that it works, though I do love certain elements, the way we get to see the characters, the way we get to know the characters through this first paragraph. But once again, I think that the number of adjectives that I'm using here is over the top. And if I ever got to rewrite it, I think I would definitely delete some of them. But I also was writing what I thought would be a longish fairy tale. So that's why I think that the atmosphere is kind of, you get the feeling that it is a fairy tale, that it is not a fantasy novel, for example, but more like a fairy tale with fantasy elements. And the further you read, the more you feel this fairy tale atmosphere. And then some more dramatic things happen. So there it was. We stopped with an old, long-forgotten line. Once love is settled on this earth and vow is sealed by kiss, the queen will be again a rose, her country will find peace. One fell with a thud on the floor. A rather short and rather plump elderly woman in a white apron, too many skirts, and funnily shaped glasses that slid down her nose. Towering over her was a very angry young woman with long black hair and smoldering black eyes. The plump woman on the floor was frantically trying to untangle herself from the abundance of her skirts that seized her movements, while the young woman was furiously yelling at her cowering form. Here, once again, I was going for dramatic effect, and in the absence of action, we have the beginning of a conflict. But reading it, once again, it's kind of a mouthful. And the next part, and long sentences, yes, I've been told that this is something that I have a tendency to do. I'm writing long sentences, and it's very difficult for people to read them. And the problem is that I do love long sentences, but I've been shortening them. Later, I've been trying to make my sentences shorter and more dynamic. Though sometimes, if I'm writing, for example, a book set in Regency England, I prefer my sentences to remain long. But reading them out loud is definitely a challenge, and I feel it now. And I have felt it while reading it because I stumbled upon several words because they were kind of difficult to pronounce in all this flow of other words. So that's it for today, I think. A dramatic beginning that would probably fail to grab anyone's attention. So next time I will read a different version of not the same scene, because the scene changed, but the characters remained, and the conflict also remained. And I don't see that there's any but maybe I will just finish reading. It's a very short first chapter. So we stopped with the young woman who was yelling at the lady who has already fallen down because she was towering over her. Yes. So here everything goes in capital letters. Yes, because she's yelling furiously. I'm not gonna yell, and I'm not really furious right now. So I'll try to get through another mouthful. What do you think you're doing by saying this old line? How many times do I have to tell you that under no circumstances you are allowed to chant it? Give the stupid old book to me, she roared in a voice that clearly bore no further arguments. But the woman that was still on the floor was rather brave, judging by the way she started shaking her head in protest, gripping the book tightly to her chest, her knuckles getting white. Now, barked the angry figure from above, and waiting neither for an answer nor for fulfillment of her command, she grabbed the book from trembling hands and shoved it roughly in the direction of someone who appeared out of nowhere at her side, standing on all fours. Now that was another long sentence. It is 4 lines long. Ever since I shouted now, it was one long sentence, and yes, I can see why it's a problem. It's definitely a problem. I mean, for this genre, it definitely is. And I lose a lot of the dynamic. But you see, it took me a while to get here. And I think that, well, I don't, I mean, like, I don't really like to read writing advice. I love reading books and, seeing what works for me as a reader and what doesn't. And it helps me realize the mistakes that I've made in my own books. So I love to, come figure it out on my own, because then the lesson sticks. Yeah, so I'm probably one of those people who likes to learn on their own mistakes. But as far as writing is concerned, it's fine. These are the kind of mistakes that you can make and learn from. Yeah, but these long sentences, they definitely have to go. So she keeps yelling, yes, shoving the book roughly in the direction of someone who appeared out of nowhere at her side, standing on all fours. Take it away and hide it so that no one can ever find it again, she ordered, still glaring at the terrified woman on the floor. Someone on all fours took the offensive object in between its sharp teeth and ran off with a growl. Almendra, started a tremulous voice from the floor, only to be cut off the next moment. And another huge block of capital letters. So dramatic, very, very dramatic. I thought that that's how dramatic worked, but keep in mind that it was more than 15 years ago. I mean, definitely more than 10 years ago, but I'm pretty sure 12, 15 years ago. Yes, so keep that in mind. And those of you who have read Almendra, I think you know that the story has changed a lot since then. So here it is. Another deep breath. Say no more. I don't want to hear another word leaving your mouth ever again. I asked you time and time again to stop, but with no effect whatsoever. I love the word whatsoever. Yep. But now you'd better listen well, because I order you to get out of my sight. Hide yourself somewhere and seal your mouth shut so that I don't see nor hear you by the time I come back. Very rude. With a lust furious glare full of hatred and fire, a tall young woman, all clad in black, strode off, leaving a sobbing figure trembling on the cold stone floor. There. The end of chapter 1. Very, very dramatic. Yeah, but I think I'm writing differently now. So if you have, reached the ending, and if you have read Almendra, maybe you will tell me whether I have changed as a writer for the better or not. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll come back when I will present another first chapter. Very, very different this time. So goodbye.